All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Tempered Leadership. I am your host, Eric Rieger, and today I am joined by my good friend, Drew Graham. Drew, how are you?
Eric, I'm well. How are you, my friend?
I am outstanding. I am living my best pandemic life. As you can,
Who's not? Who's not? And it's nice to know that I've elevated from a friend to a good friend. So
yeah, you're
that's like
making
an early gift for me. So thank you.
you're making your way up the corporate ladder in my world. It's if you for those just listening and not watching the actual YouTube channel, imagine a very broken ladder, like a really short one, missing most of the rungs, and Drew kind of just hanging on for dear life. That's
I'm
a good
just
visual.
dangling by. I'm like a climber's fingers, so I'm just barely hanging on.
That's kind of how in my head. That's really a nickname I have for you, Climber's Fingers.
Climber. That's funny. That's what my wife calls me too. So,
well, we talk every once in a while, so there's that. All right. I guess, again, this should be a warning for these types of shows that there's not going to be much content. There'll probably be a few nuggets we stumble upon, but for most of the time, it's just going to be us rambling.
Out of dumb luck, we'll actually share something.
There'll be this long, awkward pause. Like, did we just say something smart?
And then my head will just go.
Well, save that for the ending, because then I can just, I could
just a buzzkill right away.
I could split the music out and it'll be a perfect ending, and maybe we'll even wrap the season with that like a cliffhanger. Does he live? Does he die?
I'm the season closer when my head explodes. That is awesome, man.
Well, I want to give people kind of a backstory on how we met. You used to work in what they call the channel. So for anybody who might be listening for the first time, my day job is owner of a managed service company, which does IT services. And Drew and I met many, many years ago. You work for an organization called Varvid. So you would go around the country and do videography and produce content for anybody in the channel. A lot of times it would be the vendors who would want to get organizations like us doing testimonials, or you would be recording some of the live events for them. Yep. So you and I met, and you've actually interviewed me. We've been on the other ends of the mic on several occasions. But
yes, we have, and you do pretty well. I'm glad to see that everything that you learned from me, you've gleaned and utilized in your new world. So congratulations on that.
It's always beg, borrow, or steal when you're meeting somebody. It's like, what can I take from this person? that's the leadership journey we've all really been on.
What can I take? Attaboy, just take them, crush them, and then throw them to the wayside.
There's that first nugget.
No,
hold on, don't. No, that's.
I'm holding it in.
Yeah, I think they have pills for that. Yeah. So we met, and we stayed in touch all these years. You left that industry. You went into transportation, and now you've got your own Drew Graham voiceovers. Which man, I got a kudos on the name. How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, it was a struggle. Voiceovers. It was either that or voices by Drew, but that one was taken. So
I would have gone with Voices in My Head.
Well, and that one's also taken.
That's just me, though. Yeah. I would have just done that for myself, not for anybody else.
No. So what's really funny is when we originally met, and in the channel, it was one of those things. There are times when you connect with someone, or you bump into someone, or you're introduced to someone, and there's just that instant. You instantly jive with them, you instantly connect with them, and you might even jive, literally shuck and jive with them. You were definitely one of those people that early on in my career, you were one of the first people that I had the opportunity to interview and sit down and talk with. And you just know when you are with someone who's cut from the same kind of cloth that you are. And you definitely fell into that. You made my job really easy. So my job here is to make yours incredibly difficult today. So I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make you look like an absolute idiot.
I don't
and
need
so
any
it begins.
Help with that. I don't need any help with that. Anybody who knows me or has listened to the show for 5 minutes knows I'm perfectly set in that department. But I believe the term is called payback, if I'm not mistaken.
And it is if I'm not, let me check really quick. Yeah, it's a bitch.
You had to Google that? I am not cleaning your computer.
Super fast. Had to Google that.
So what's your journey been like to go from that into business owner? I mean, take everybody through kind of your, I mean, because I've always, when we've worked together, doing the recording and stuff like that, I always appreciated the voice. Like, you definitely have a voice for doing voiceovers. You did great work with the video company. It was always, no kidding aside, it was always easy to work with you. You made people feel comfortable. But what was it that kind of pushed you into that, starting a business, during a global pandemic?
Well,
That's
what's interesting is I went from being at Varvid into being a school bus driver in transportation, like you said that. So I was a school bus driver
Mhm.
for about 4 years, and that was something that was I just wanted out of what I was doing at the time, for the very reason that I had a huge life change. I was going through a separation and divorce. I had had open heart surgery a couple of years prior to that. And I was just shifting. My life was making a massive shift. And so I was like, okay, well, what can I do now that I can generate an income? I can spend some time with my son, and what do I like to do? And so I went from being that videographer, sales, on air, gaffer, grip, best boy kind of role into that driver. And that was something my dad did for about 18 years that if you would have asked me, I would have said, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. But there is so much to learn um, from being behind the wheel of a bus, but more importantly, from children. Their reckless abandon for not caring what people think, particularly the littles. When I say the littles, I mean like preschool, kindergarten, first and second grade. There comes a point about second grade where people start getting a bit of an ego, or they become aware of what's kind of weird and odd. And I remember a kid one time peeing his pants on the bus right behind me, and the kid next to him, I overheard this. The kid next to him goes, "That's okay. I pee my pants too." And it was in that moment of complete understanding, and without even recognizing what that meant for the child who said it to the one who had peed, how just gracious and how selfless, and how much it was a thing of beauty. It was really cute. I've also heard a kid ask another one, how do you think a baby wins a baby fight? And and I struggled with that one for a long time, because I was like, well, how does a baby win a baby fight? Do they take little tiny brass knuckles, or what do they do? So anyways, that was just really cute. And
your Google search history has to be amazing.
Yeah, I've had people knock on my door and ask to see some identification because of it.
That does not surprise me in the least.
And then I went from driving school buses into doing some other things, but all generated in sales, whether it was spas and fireplaces, or beer, wine, and liquor for a local distributor here in town. It was another shift. I seem to kind of the reoccurring theme in my life is find something that you think you might like, and then do it. And then if you don't like it, then stop doing it. And so I had been a radio DJ at a local rock station here for 10 years. That was the best job I ever had, and I loved it so much. And I utilized the ability to communicate, which I'm good at, used my voice, which apparently I have an okay one, and my ability to, and my love for music. And so I took all those things, and it was literally the perfect job. I often think about where would I be if I hadn't left that job now? And I'm glad that I did. But there are moments that we all have where it was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have left. That was perfect. But it got me to where I am now. So I was like, during that time, I was like, God, I could probably use my voice. And a buddy of mine left radio and started his own voiceover work about 15 years ago. He's like, dude, you should really get into it. And that was 15 years ago. Yeah. I'll get to it. So the pandemic hits, and I'm starting, well, not half step back. So I'm starting to be a little bit bored with my current position as a sales guy at this beverage company, in a good company, and fun, free beer, wine, and liquor is not a bad trade-off for in lieu of pay at times.
They're probably losing out on that deal with
Oh
you.
God, yeah. They have a sample or a breakage wall, and it's like on Fridays when we'd go in for staff meetings and stuff, it'd be like I'd get there early and be the first guy in the office and take my pick of samples for
Yeah.
clients.
Oops, that accidentally broke. I
Yeah.
guess I'll drink it.
Oh, yeah. That's 20. There's 24 in a case. Oh, I'll take the 23 then.
Whoops.
Yeah. So it was in December, and I thought to myself, I'm not a big praying guy. I'm not a religious guy, but I said out loud to the universe or whomever or whatever is listening, I said, all right, I think it's time for me to really jump into voiceover, and I need a sign. And I don't need a kind of sign. I have to wonder if that was the sign. I need a full blown hit me in the face with a 2x4 kind of a sign from whomever, whatever, to tell me it's time. And then I let it go and I didn't think about it. And then, on March 15th rolls around and they're starting to talk about tightening the belts, and April, I think March 27th, I think was the day that they let me. I was the last one hired, so I was the first one to go. And so I was unemployed. I was drawing benefits, unemployment benefits. I got that $1,200 bonus from the government. So now I'm being paid to start a new business for all intents and purposes. And so it was like, okay, so I did it. And I never knew how hard building a business is, from conception to actual sales and creating content or a widget or whatever, creating what you sell, what you provide, the service that you provide. I didn't know how hard it was and how much time, and it's still hard, and it's still really hard, actually.
Oh, you mean you can't take like a 30-minute course on YouTube or something and just set up
You
shop?
certainly can, and then like any business, I'm sure there are snake oil salesmen who will say to you, you can make 6 figures in 6 months. Well, horseshit, you can't either. You can't do that in anything. There's no such thing as an overnight success, right? Success comes through trial and error. Success comes through staying patient. Success comes from staying in the game. You got to be in the game, and you have to be patient. And that's what I'm learning. And that patience part is really difficult, because I have these preconceived ideas of where I am and versus where I thought I was going to be. And to keep those in check is a dance, man. It's a balance. It's a struggle. It's a little bit of all those things.
I find the older I get, the harder the patience part is. There's something about your own sense of mortality that, again, as the clock starts ticking, and I don't consider myself old by any stretch. I mean, but still, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and there's a different perspective on life. And one of the books that I've read that really kind of had an impact on me was Life in Half a Second. And it talks about, go to age 80 and subtract your age, and then multiply it by, this number to get your number of days remaining left on the planet. Because, the average person, 80 is a good number.
Yep.
And it's like, you start getting that number and it changes your perspective. Instead of like, I've got time, it's like, holy crap, there's only less than 10,000 days left.
Could you imagine if you died on that day, on day 80?
I would have been like, why did I read that book? Why didn't I read a different book that had 90 or something?
Put me at 120.
That stupid book. Yeah. But I want to go back to something with driving a school bus, because you said your dad did it for what was it, 18 years?
Yeah, he did it for the school district that I grew up in for 18 years, 17 or 18 years. I think it was 18.
Yeah, and I remember that you and your dad had a pretty strong bond, if I remember correctly. And that's another thing you and I had in common was, a really close relationship with our fathers. And, I don't know all the details, but like my father was a catalyst for me getting into business. He was, the biggest fan I ever had. Yeah. Losing him was earth-shattering, life-changing, the whole 9 yards.
Did you lose him quickly, or did you know he was leaving?
4 years he had cancer. So initially the diagnosis was that he was going to survive, and then it progressed and spread. And, then the last year was the roughest one because we,
Sure.
everybody knew, but he was one of those fighters that would just not accept the fact. And
Sure.
so he drove a truck. So he was in transportation as well. He drove a truck for up till 3 months before he passed away.
Oh, wow.
He got his strength from being behind the wheel, and it was his kingdom. And he could do anything as long as he had, the stamina to drive. And the doctors were, they were blown away. Like, he never took meds for the chemo. Like, he never got sick. He grew hair back. He was bald and he started growing hair from chemo. And they're like,
Lucky
this
guy.
dude's like, he's an anomaly. He doesn't fit any of the molds. And he just kept telling him, you're going to write books about me. I'm going to be the one that beats this. And they're like, hey, if you believe that, keep believing it, because it seems, man. Yeah. Well, I got a lot of inspiration from him. I got a lot of drive from him. And, when I was struggling at the job I had before I started this business, like, I was to the point of, just eating Tums every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I hated my life. I hated the job. And I just, one day I said, I said, I can't take it anymore. I got to do something else. I'm thinking I might just go out on my own. He goes, you have a credit card, do it.
Yeah,
like,
what's the absolute worst that can happen? I just saw, I post every now and then online these little blurbs, and someone said to me, and this was today's blurb, really weird that we would bring this up today. Someone said to me the other day, we were talking, and they're like, yeah, but life's short. And I thought, and we've all said life's short, and it's never really rang very true to me, but for some reason, this person said it and it stuck to me, and I couldn't stop thinking about life short. Maybe it's that whole thing of mortality. Maybe it's about the older we get, things, lessons are taught until they're learned. Maybe that's, anyways. And so I today's was, people say life's short, then stop wasting it.
Yeah.
It's easy. I would much rather say, do you remember when I did X, rather than man, I wish I would have done X. Even if it's like jumping from job to job. I used to think that was a big negative in my corner. From a mental perspective, I struggle with that. I've been to therapy about that. But the reality is, and for me, my reality is that it's helped me be a well-rounded individual. Hey, man, I know what I don't want to do, or I know what I'm good at. I know the areas where I excel, and I know the areas where I'm weak. So why would I try to do something, or why would I continue to do something if A, I'm not very good at it, B, I'm not happy about it?
Yeah. And I think that's it's kind of like the mental health stigma, the job hopper stigma of, if you can just go into a place and explain, like, hey, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I found things I don't want to do. So I'm that much further along in my progression and my maturity.
Absolutely.
And, that's, I think you kind of hit it on the head there. A lot of what holds people back from, quote unquote, chasing their dreams is that fear of failure. And it's like, well, what would you rather live with, the fear of failure and never trying, or the memories of the journey and actually executing on something? And if you fail, so what? It's like you said, you're learning something new about either something you aren't good at or something you don't want to do, but at least you've tried it, and you can put that to bed, and you can either practice and learn and get better at it. This is certainly what I did through my career. I had no idea how to run a business. I kind of had the experience you're talking about of, you get in there and you're just kind of like, I'm here because I didn't want to be somewhere else.
Yep.
And then other people kind of start digging your vibe, and then they're like giving you some business, and then you're like, wow, this is a real thing. I have an employee. I guess this is serious. I probably should start paying more attention. I better find somebody who can help me get to another level.
Yeah,
and then
I don't know anything about books, so I better call a CPA.
Yeah. Well, I probably should have done that a lot sooner than I did, but yeah.
By the way, you still owe me about $186,000, but we'll talk about that later.
Oh, cool. It's down.
Yeah,
it's down from where I thought
little
it was.
by little. A jar of pickles every week counts. So
can I do that $5 a month for the rest of my life, as long as I live
just another? If you would tape a penny to a postcard and send it to me, that'd be great.
Your wall's going to be full of pennies soon.
Yes, it's funny.
So I want to touch back though a little bit on, we talked about, the impact my dad had, but I was really trying to get more of, because you and your dad were pretty close. Like,
Yeah,
did
but
did
it
he,
was interesting. My dad, and I have a question about your dad too when we're done with this. My
you want me
dad
to
and
just switch
I
sides here
didn't,
on you on the
yeah,
couch and you
my
can
dad
go
and I
on
didn't
there?
get tight until probably high school. There was a point as a parent, I think there's a point where you become not a parent anymore, and you become more of a mentor and a guide. Uh, and a Sherpa kind of in a way. And then there gets to be a point where you become a mentor and a guide. And then after that mentor guide phase, there comes this friend phase. I mean, you're always a friend, but you have to be a parent up to a certain point, and then that point goes away and they're kind of on their own, and you're like, well, hey, here's a thought. It's not like do this anymore. You can't really say that to a 22. You can say it to a 22-year-old, but they're not going to listen because they're going to figure that shit out for themselves. You can say, hey, in the future, rather than drink at 6:30 in the morning and then drink until 6 p.m. and then have to work at 9 that night, why don't you not drink that, Dad? Here's a thought, or something along those lines. um, and then my dad became my friend, and it was probably in my late 20s, early 30s where our bond changed and we became very, very tight. Did he was a guy who did his own thing, but he did it for the betterment of everyone else. He was the kind of a guy who he started the union in Squim for the bus drivers because there were some real big discrepancies between seniority and non-seniority, and people were getting the shaft. And so he saw that, and so he unionized, and he also was part of he built a Friends of the Ditch, which is a long story, but it was what he tried to do was try to bring people together for the betterment of the whole. He saw himself as a conduit of progressing life forward in a positive manner. And I think that is absolutely part of my DNA. That is absolutely part of my structure, and I can correlate that to my father for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my dad, it's a similar, I think you're spot on with the changes that parents go through. At least, again, personal experience. I don't have children, but just myself and people I've known
Mhm.
is, there's that up to 18, it's you're legally responsible for keeping them alive phase.
Yeah,
I think there's
absolutely.
there's that you're like, yeah, well, I'll be your friend, but I'm gonna, kick you in the butt first and make sure
Mhm.
you come home at night and all that. And then there's that mentor stage, they're okay, they're leaving the house, they're going out, they're trying to make their way in the world. I should share some experience. And then once you figured that out, or if you get to that point, then that friendship starts. And for my dad, he was gone most of my childhood because he was an over the road driver, so 6 days a week he wasn't home. And
Sure.
then he's got one day to pay the bills, fix the truck, deal with my mom, clean the house, whatever he's got to do. He's got one day to do it, and then he's back on the road.
Mhm.
I think he felt guilty about that a lot, because he tried to make it up in the later years. But he just, he became a fan of what I was doing because he could see that I learned a lot from his failures. He tried to start his own business, and he was wildly successful early on driving a truck. And he thought, I'll reinvest that money. If I have three trucks running, I'll make three times the money. In simple math, that sounds great, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more to business than just buy three
Than
trucks.
bringing in the money. Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
So he learned the hard way, and it cost him everything. But he never stopped. Like, even the bankruptcy, even complete and utter failure by business standards, he just kept going and plowing through. And I told him, like, later on in life, as we were getting into those final months, I said, I learned more from you about business than anybody I've ever met. And he just looked at me, he said, I was a complete failure. How did you learn from me? I said, I learned a lot of things, what not to do because of mistakes you made, and it made me a better person. It made me a better business person. And he never looked at it that way. As he absorbed the failure but just wouldn't let it bother him. But he never realized these were teaching moments too, that I was paying attention and watching of, what not to do. And there's so much you can learn from quote unquote failure. I don't even like the term failure, because it's really just
Yeah,
learning
failure.
ways that,
There's a quote out there that says failure is a myth. It's not.
yeah,
It's failure is isn't. It's not failure, man. It's an opportunity to say, okay, well, that didn't work. it doesn't mean that it's the end game, right?
I think
That's not
that's
the
the only
final
time.
straw.
I think it's the only time that it is failure is when you let something like that stop you. Like when that
And
becomes
that's a choice that you make.
right. Right. So that was the, I mean, I kind of had a similar path, and then we got really close. And again, he was always encouraging, he's always having me go out there and just, like I'm a really harsh critic of myself. You mentioned therapy. I've been in therapy for a year and a half now, and trying to unlearn a lot of behaviors from my youth and
Mhm.
early adulthood. And it was like I inherited my grandfather's temper. I always very short fuse, and he would just watch me and he'd like, okay, now that you got that out, like what have we accomplished? You're still at the same point you were before you got mad, and you're a
Yeah.
lot more tired now, so like what did we really accomplish here? He always this logical, and it's like it would drive me nuts. It would make me more mad that he's throwing logic in my face, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well, I'm not done being angry yet. It's like,
Okay. Well, keep
yeah.
being angry.
And he
And while
just
you're being
goes,
angry, let's try to figure this out.
no, he would just go sit down and like, oh, I'm going to go watch TV then until you're done being an idiot. And then we can come back and,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
always had that never stop, keep moving forward, no matter what life threw at you. And, I see that in what you're talking about with your journey. It's just like, hey, pandemic, I need a sign. Okay, good. And by the way, I think what we've learned from this is we can blame you for this stupid pandemic because you
Yeah,
were asking for the
absolutely. Boy,
sign.
you are more than welcome. It's done me wonders. So
Well,
it's
but
interesting.
that's a thing. You're courageous in the fact that you're just gonna like, hey, I don't care what's going. I'm gonna start this business, and it's you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's like you're out there giving it a shot, and I I wish the best for you. I mean, you're people who are listening. They should see the talent oozing from
Yeah.
you.
Thank
People
you.
should just hire you right now.
It's oozing.
Or is that the massage from
Yeah,
earlier
that
today?
was the massage oil. I got a massage earlier for those who early because I knew it was a big day for me. I had to be rested and ready to go. And so
Yeah,
no,
we sent one of
thank
our
you.
our studio people out there to massage
Yeah,
you, right?
all 12 of them. And that's being very liberal. When your dad died, you said you had about 4 years heads up. And I've asked people this. Um, do you think that was this is a tough one to frame it in a way that doesn't sound coarse, but I'll just move right forward into it. Do you think that
Yeah.
it was fortunate that you knew that he was dying, or would you rather have him gone like that?
Looking back on it, I appreciate the fact that we had time to talk through it, because at some point towards the end he kind of knew, like, there was no way out of this.
Yeah.
He was done. And I distinctly remember one conversation that like we would have never had if it would have just happened. And we're sitting there, and he was talking about, because like I have a ship that sits on my desk at my office. It's a fairly large model ship that he built in the 50s by hand, and when he was in high school, like he cut out, and this is, remember, before the internet, before there
Yeah.
were plants, like just from seeing a picture, he hand carved all the pieces and meticulous strings and wires up the sides. He built like a model of the US Constitution,
Oh,
a big
wow.
sailing ship. Yeah. So
Wow.
it sits under glass in my office, the same case he built it in back in the 50s. And it's a reminder to me because he was a handyman. He learned electricity, plumbing, like all this stuff. There's nothing he couldn't do. He was a man's man. And he looked at me, and he said, boy, I wish I could have gone to school to be an architect, like, because I asked him, I said, is there anything you would have done differently? He says, I really wish I could have been an architect. I said, well, you would have been a great one, because I've seen, he had a model railroad. I mean, in the little details,
Mhm.
he was into that stuff. I mean, he had a talent for it. And I said, like an idiot, I'm sitting there and I look at him and I go, well, why didn't you? And he just turns and looks at me, and he like kind of like, you're like, I was getting married and had a kid on the
Yeah.
way. You are part of the reason I didn't get to pursue my dreams, because I had a responsibility and a family to take care of, and you do what you got to do to take care of your family.
Yeah.
And so, then that's kind of the idiot moment. Like, here's a guy, 3 months to live, and you're going, well, why didn't you do more with your life? like an idiot. But
well, and I don't
you
think,
know,
and I think that that's a fair question too, is why didn't you? And I think that he had a fair answer. I would encourage you not to hold on to that and let that be the reason that he didn't fulfill his destiny.
I'm not caring. Like, it was just kind of one of those things. It's like
Yeah.
that just proved his character of, he would never put himself first. That was one of the things, like, and I've told this story a bunch of times, but at his funeral, or at the wake, it was 8 hours of just standing there, and there was a line out the door for the whole 8 hours of people that came from all over the country, because, again, 50 years he drove all over the country.
Yeah.
When people heard he died, they came to pay their respects, and every single one of them had a story. And my mom and I were sitting there, and we were looking at each other, and I'm like, who are these people? She had neither one of us had any idea he knew and touched all these lives, and every single one of them had a story. And I go, there's, like, that was the ultimate mic drop and walk out the door, because
Yeah.
how can you ever live a life like that? Like, I mean, I've met a ton of people, but I can guarantee you there's not going to be a line like that out the door of people with all these stories. I'm
That's
like,
fascinating,
he had
man.
50 years of touching lives, because he never put himself first. That was always the lesson. He's like, you always put other people first, and look at what happens. It came back in spades. And
Yeah, that's quite a legacy. That's quite a legacy.
yeah.
What I would say that I was also, I find it fortunate that we had that time, that we had the 18 months from the time of diagnosis to the time of death, that I could, be honest with him. I could, and not that I wasn't honest with him before, but I mean, ask him questions I never thought I'd ask him, do things with him that I never thought I'd do, help him, just have conversations at a level of which you should have anyway.
Right.
Not because someone's dying. It's because they're your father, or they're your brother, or they're your sister, or they're family, or they're a friend, for God's sakes. I think that that's one of the things, and we touched on this a little bit, that people are afraid to communicate truth, their truth. When I communicate my truth, it doesn't have to be your truth, but as a friend, you'll sit there and listen, and you'll say, oh, wow, I didn't know that about you, or that's wonderful, or yes, oh, I agree, or no, I see your point, but I don't agree with you. And it's in those moments of communication that I think that there is plenty of room, whether you're an employee or an employer or a brother or a husband or an aunt or whomever you are. It's in those moments of communication where we can make small shifts, and lots of small shifts equals a quantum leap. And it just takes time, but you have to be willing and open. And it's risky, man. You're being vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, but talk to people.
The vulnerability aspect, I think, is the part that scares a lot of people, because it's so many people, at least that I've come in contact with and that I know, they live in fear of what others are going to think of them. And you've known me long enough to know that that's out the window with me. I could care less what other people think. I mean, I'm not going to go around intentionally trying to be it, but I'm going to live my life and be who I am. And it's either going to resonate with you, or you're going to think I'm a jerk, or, like, I'm not going to try to be rude to anybody, but, like, I'm just going to be who I am, and, try to, like, carry on my father's legacy and be a good human being and put other people first and do the right thing. But I'm going to speak my mind. And, this is the other part of the conversation you and I had that we wanted to kind of dive into here on this episode. The whole, where the country has gone in the last little while.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even have to frame it, and everybody knows what we're talking about. And I've been in the same conversation. I've been called a bleeding heart liberal and a gun carrying conservative, which I'm neither of those things. But that's kind of how, just the fact that I can call out both sides of the equation and just call something wrong when I see something wrong, and just say it and say, I don't agree with this, and then be able to have a conversation with somebody about it. It seems like we've lost that ability to say, like, Drew, I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion. Like, I respect the fact that you have
I
a
don't
different
even have to
opinion.
respect your opinion very much. What I do is I respect you. And
Yeah.
I think enough of you as a human being to say, okay, well, that's not how I see it. It doesn't minimize your worth as a human because you think differently than I do. But but nothing. It doesn't. And what I've seen in the last, not only the last 4 years, shit, we can go back the last 10 or 15 years,
Sure.
is this chasm or this crack between the red and the blue, or the Republicans and Democrats, or whomever, whatever, pick an eco-social boundary, and then, but it's becoming so deep and it's so wide, and there's that room for compromise, or that room for seeing it through a different set of eyes, or that room for having an open, frank discussion. And at the end, you don't have to find that, one doesn't have to join the other. You can still be separate, but there has to be some understanding and some some clarity on not only your position, but the position of those that you are facing or alongside of, or whatever the case may be. I think you're absolutely right. This level of anger and between people who don't see eye to eye is so toxic, and it's so hurtful, and it permeates not only in the political world. It now it's affecting families. Now it's affecting schools. Now it's affecting everything, society as a whole. And that, to me, is so sad, because we can change that with a willingness to be candid and understanding
and vulnerable
and totally vulnerable. It's just people are afraid of that vulnerability. You're right. You nailed it. And it's afraid of what you said it too. It's I don't want to look like I'm weaker in the eyes of you because I was vulnerable. Well, there's a lot to be said in those moments of vulnerability. There's a lot to be learned in those moments of vulnerability. If you take them not as an opportunity to strike, but as an opportunity to take a step back and reassess.
Well, I'll use a perfect example of what's happened to me over the last few years. And it's no secret to anybody that I have not been a fan of the current administration. I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat. I've gone on record as I'm an independent. I try to pick people who will serve the greater good, and that's hard in politics nowadays because it just seems everywhere you look, everybody's batshit crazy now, and it's special interest. But I've been very critical because the behavior, like there's just certain things that are right and wrong, and there's just certain ways that you expect leaders to conduct themselves, whether it's a leader I share the same title as the president of the United States. He's president, I'm president of my company. The stuff that was being said and done to people, if I conducted myself that way, we would have lost customers left and right. We would have lost employees. We would have just turned people off. That has nothing to do with policy, right? And there were policies I disagreed with, but my beef was with the person and the conduct. And I would get into conversations with people, and they would immediately start attacking me personally for my beliefs against how this person was conducting themselves. And I'm like, can we just stay on topic here? This is not, again, not a Republican Democrat thing. I said, I'm socially liberal. I'm fiscally conservative. So which bucket, depending on the part of the conversation, I fall into both buckets. Yep. And so then it became a personal attack. And part of my vulnerability is I've shared my story online and to anybody who will listen of my journey with mental health. I started, my birthday present to myself last year was to start seeing a therapist because I was in a really dark spot. I had thoughts that were not good thoughts. There were days I just didn't want to get up anymore. And I wished that, I'd go to bed and just not wake up the next day. And I never had thoughts of killing myself, but I had thoughts of, boy, I wish this was over. And that's not healthy. You get to the point where, but I figured I was going to be vulnerable and share that. Well, this opportunity presented itself for people to use that against me and like, okay, well, you're weak and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all you're doing is replicating the behavior you see on TV from this individual. It's like I said, how can you, I'm fine. I'm in a great place. My therapist did wonders. I'm as mentally tough as I've ever been. Your words don't have any effect on me because the people who love me truly. They showed up in mass when this when I was going through this. And it was them who got me into, it was the people who truly cared, got me in sport. I don't need you. Like, if this is who you really are, if that's what you identify with, guess what? I've been cleaning house and getting those people out of my life because, like, you have a problem.
Yeah. And it's, and You said earlier that the way that you operate is that, you know, you don't give a rat's ass what someone thinks about you. I'm actually the flip side of that for years. And while I'm starting to alter that way, it's taken me a long time to understand why I am that way. But, you know, thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. But
therapy
the
will help
reality
you work that out.
you walk into a room of 100 people and 98 of them dig me and they like me and we're all good friends. I spend a lot of time with those two trying to get them to like me, trying to not even understand, but just somehow becoming closer to them. And I have learned in the last decade that, you know, fuck you. If you don't like me because of who I am, we probably ought not be in the same room then, because I'm me. And if you don't dig me, you're lost.
And there's a difference between that and intentionally being a jerk.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know,
totally. I think when you attack someone for the way they think, and not being able, well, first of all, the fact that you attack someone for the way they think is just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as a human being. Listen to them, disagree with them, but why would you attack them?
Yeah.
I mean, unless they're hitting you or punching you, then you would want to counter, of course. But I think that the lack of empathy for perspective is just one of those things that we just need more of. And you're absolutely right. Why? What is there to gain by demoralizing another human being?
Well, that's part of what I learned in therapy is I was a bit of a toxic person in my own company for a long time. And it was the subtle stuff, you know, it wasn't like openly, aggressively just being a jerk. I mean, it was subtle mind game type stuff that, you know, it was stuff I'd learned growing up. You know, my mom was the master. Like, I don't speak with her anymore. I've completely cut her out of my life. She's a master manipulator, and it was just the subtle and I remember Monty, one of the leadership guys on our team, he sat me down early on and he's like, you know, he goes, if I come in and say something, it carries a certain weight. He says, but when it comes from you, words matter. It's like you're bringing a baseball bat to the you know, to the equation, and your words hit people over the side of the head and you're driving people away. And so that was a big thing for me, is like, you know, when I say I don't care what people think about me, I mean that to the extent of when I'm being my true authentic self, you know, like I'm living intentionally for other people. And I say something like, hey, we're going to do something for the greater good. You may not like this, but, you know, we need to do this to move another step forward. And if they don't like it and they don't like me, I gave it my best, and I'm trying to do things the right way. If you don't like it, that's fine. But when I'm coming in there and just kind of like, well, who screwed up and who did, you know, and then it's the blame game. And now you're seeing that at a national level, at our leadership. And that's where I think this big divide has come, is it's not political in the sense of, it's not about policy. It's about how people are treating other people, and just this attack on logic and reason and fact.
Yeah.
And that's driving people crazy.
One that for me, it's blatant disregard for the truth is the toughest one for me to overcome. Listen, I get it if you're misogynist. I get it if you're xenophobe. I get it if you're racist. I mean, I don't get it, but you have to make a choice to change those things. And if you choose not to, then I'm going to gauge where the information is coming from based on that. Yeah. But when you flat out take information known to be factual and true and distort it to your benefit, and repeatedly distort truths, not just one particular truth, which that entity hammered away at untruths all the time. I understand. I get it. Listen, I respect the role of the president, but I don't have to respect the president.
And I think that's the thing is, you know, there's an acknowledgement on my part that it happens on both sides of the aisle. You
Absolutely.
know, like Republicans, Democrats, independents, like anybody who's in that office or who's in office, there are people who, you know, massage people who manipulate things for their own benefit. I mean, that's been, like you said, the last 10, 15 years we've gotten away from the parties trying to cooperate and in a bipartisan manner and helping the people, to it's been more about doing everything you can to stay in power.
Yeah.
And so it's not about us anymore, it's about staying in power. And the problem is like when you hold the highest office in the land, you have the pulpit every day. You have you know the other stuff that senators and governors and even mayors, they don't necessarily have the microphone every single day, so it doesn't get hammered into us constantly. And that's what I think has been the toughest challenge for me, is like it's been 4 years, and all it's done is it's allowed some people to crawl out from under rocks and say, hey, now our voice is being represented. And
And
so
it's
that
also
voice
helped.
has gotten louder.
Yeah, it will not help. It's also those who made a lot of noise early on about the misfortunes and the misgivings and the deception and the untruths weren't, they just, it was happening so frequently that they couldn't keep up with saying, do you hear this? Are you listening? And I think that that's, and then they gave up. They're like, well, no one's listening. So I can't
Yeah.
keep doing this. If I'm not going to beat my head up against a wall, if no one's going to help me remove the wall. And so, yeah, it was, I think collectively there has been a sigh in the last 30 days. And I think for some, it's been a sigh of relief. I think for others, it's been a sigh of failure to continue. And while I don't agree with the failure to continue, I I I understand that you get momentum and you buy into, or there is someone who speaks your language, and you want to continue following that person or that vibe or that organization. I get it. But it ebbs and flows, man. Life, if nothing is cyclical, that's for sure.
Well, I'll say that I think the incoming administration is going to have their hands full.
Oh, I think any incoming administration is going to, from this point forward, I don't, frankly, I don't see it being, I don't, the change has been so drastic in the last decade that
the pendulum is swinging in full
oh yeah.
force.
And when it gets to
Yeah.
this point, when it comes all the way back here, it's
Yeah.
going to be ugly, and it's
Yeah.
going to be ugly again coming. It's just, it's interesting time. It's a really interesting time to be alive. That's what I keep telling people. It's like,
Well,
oh
isn't
my
that
God, can you believe this pandemic? Oh my God. Oh, the elections. Oh, it's like, can you imagine when we look, when our great grandkids or whatever look back and they say, oh wow, I wonder what that was like to live there. It's like us looking back to like World War I, or even like the Great Depression, or the turn of the century, or when they invented, whatever. It's just like, oh my God, remember when there wasn't cars? And you're
Yeah.
like, what? There wasn't cars? Now we got hoverboards now. It's like,
Well, that's what's fascinating to me, is like I love history, and the story of the history, and people are there are some people who are freaking out about how things have progressed in this or lack of progress, as it were.
sure.
The direction the country's gone in. And I kind of have to stop and remind people, it's like, in the 30s, Madison Square Garden was full to capacity and hosted a Nazi rally. Like, that happened in this country, and there was nobody saying anything about it. It was just like another thing. So, I
Mhm.
mean, we've had challenges in our history, and it seems like the country is always undergoing some kind of, democracy is always being challenged. Our freedoms, our way of life are always being challenged. And that's where I think the leadership piece is so critical. Of it just takes a few of us to stand up and say, like, that's not how we conduct ourselves here. This is not acceptable. Policy aside, like, hey, if we want to talk policy, we need to talk about, there needs to be a set of rules or a set of guideposts of, this is how when you're in a leadership position, I don't care if it's, one person company or president of the United States, there are certain guidelines you conduct yourself, that we all agree on, that this is the rhetoric we're going to use or avoid, and this is
Mhm.
this is how we're going to conduct ourselves, so that we can hear each other, that we can talk about our differences. And it used to be where they could just come to some kind of, where nobody wins but everybody gets something.
Yeah.
I long for those days where at least there were no winners and losers truly. It was just kind of like everybody got a little something. Nobody was
Yeah, hey,
really,
we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got half of it. And
yeah,
same goes for them. They didn't get everything they wanted, but we gave them half of what they asked. So I
yeah,
mean, so it becomes,
compromise.
yeah. Oh my God forbid we compromise. You know,
Yeah.
it's a win-win. It's not a win-lose. I mean, I think this era. I mean, I
Well, let
truly
me ask you
believe.
this. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
You had mentioned, we talked about vulnerability quite a bit, and how vulnerability can be perceived as a weakness, right? And it's
Mhm.
especially now more than ever, I think, with again the current person who's in office
Sure.
totally sees vulnerability as a weakness. Do you see that compromise has also fallen into that same bucket? As if you compromise,
Oh yeah,
you're
you're
weak.
weak. If you give in at any level, then you have lost.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, again, as I said earlier, it leaks into everything. It just doesn't leak into the, it leaks into a business world. Like, hey dude, here's what we're going, we're going to the board and we're going to ask for these things. And don't back down, or, we're going to, I'm renewing my contract as an employee, and I'm asking for this, or I'm walking. Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Look at it from their perspective. Maybe they're not flush at the moment. Maybe they've had a bad quarter and they want to give you those things, but they just can't do it now. So they'll break it down into percentages, and maybe they'll throw you a bigger bonus. If it's just an opportunity to find ways for everyone to get something, not everything they want, something they want. And I think that, yeah, I think absolutely. I think that this thought of win lose, black white, shades of gray are slowly becoming extinct.
Yeah. Well, Simon Sinek is one of my. I'm a big fan, and he's constantly in my reading rotation. And he's got a great short little video about empathy in the workplace, and it talks about how a lot of companies, you come in and somebody hasn't hit their sales number, and the sales manager comes in. It's like and they're all over the employee. Why aren't you hitting your say? What's wrong with you? Blah blah blah. And he says, what happened if the sales manager came in and said, hey, you didn't hit your sales numbers this quarter. Are you okay? Is everything going
How can I
okay in
help
your
you?
world? Yeah,
What is
yeah,
it? What is it that
exactly.
you need from me?
Yeah. And just flip the script, and instead of coming at people, I mean, there's so much that could change and it's such little effort. It doesn't take a lot to care about another human being. If you're a decent person, it really doesn't take a whole bunch. It's just 5 minutes of, hey, are you good?
Yeah.
And if somebody's got something going on, let them talk. It's hard for people to, especially in companies, like the squeaky wheel usually gets shown the door, right? People don't like, I don't want you bringing your personal crap here. Deal with that at home.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like, let's get it out, because if we can solve some of those problems, or at least point you in the direction, you're going to have a much happier and more productive employee. Isn't that good for everybody?
Yeah. And
Just seems common sense.
God forbid you get a little vested in someone's life.
Mm,
I mean, I'm
yeah.
not asking you to be my best friend, and I'm not asking you to be my therapist, but I have a thought. I have this thing has been troubling me. Is there, I've my son is 20 and he's already drinking. I'm just stressing about that, and that's that, it's okay to have those conversations.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And people are likely,
By the way, my
especially
son's
this
not
year.
drinking and he's 22. He drinks like a fish, but he's fine.
Well, and especially in this pandemic, I mean, I don't know a single person who hasn't been mentally stressed this year in
Oh,
some way, shape, or form. Even if you're
absolutely.
having a great year, you're still responsible. Like, if you're a business owner and you're having a great year, you're still responsible for protecting all those lives that are in your charge. And, so we had to make some decisions early on about COVID, pulling people out of the field, because we had no idea what was going on. Like, we've got better science, I think, and there's still a lot that's out there to be determined. But I mean, you just do the right thing, and you let the chips fall where they may. And we communicated heavily with our clients, and guess what happened? We started a conversation, and they were like, "Huh, you might be onto something here. Maybe we should take a few steps to protect ourselves." And yeah, that's good that
Mhm.
we can do a lot remotely, and we just figured it out together. It's like, I was vulnerable, like, hey, by the way, I didn't go to medical school. I saw some reports on the news. I talked to my doctor. I called some friends who were in the ICU. I got information from various sources. This is what I'm seeing a pattern happen. Maybe we really need to take this a little bit more seriously. And guess what?
Yep.
It worked out.
Yep.
Communication.
And God and goodness, we say it all the time, God forbid you actually communicate with them and you do your own research. I think that's another thing that's really important from any perspective, is that yes, you have your avenues of where you ingest information and where it comes at you, your funnels. Take a moment in those times and go to where you usually wouldn't go. Go to places that you don't typically like. I'm a big fan of NPR, but at times I'll also throw on Fox and listen to Fox Nation for an hour or two. Not because I agree with it, but because I want to know all the information that's out there, because not everyone's perfect, man. They will censor things that they don't want to have and they being every single outlet, with maybe the exception of the AP, but even the AP will do it. So anyways, so I'm glad that you went out there and got information and asking questions in real life versus just getting information. When you start asking questions, you will quickly see where the truth lies.
Well, that's you have to not be afraid. Again, people sometimes don't want to ask questions because they don't want to be afraid.
They want to know the truth.
Yeah. Well, that too. They don't want to know the truth, but they also don't want to look stupid for asking a question that somebody may have a visceral reaction for and say, "Why would you even ask that question, you idiot? Everybody knows this." And it's like, so you're vulnerable. It all goes. It kind of wraps it up in a nice little bow.
Yeah, being vulnerable always. Our time. I told you I was on borrowed puppy time.
Well, it's a perfect way to end the segment. Yep. Before we go though, I would like you to give out contact information if you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely.
So if people
I'm reachable
a
couple of different ways. It's drewgrahamvo.com, DREWGRAHAMVO.com. On there, you can access my blog. I think all my social media outlets are found on there as well too. My phone number is on there. Hell, my address might even be on there. I'd have to check that. But yeah, driving school bus now again for a while in the mornings and the afternoons allows me to generate an income, a regular income, and also get some health insurance. But then I spend 6-7 hours a day in the studio as well too, editing and voicing stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's going to take off because you've got a lot of talent, you've got a lot of heart, and you're just a good person all around. And
Thanks, Eric.
I hate saying that on a recorded place where you could throw it back in my face. But I really appreciate you coming on, taking some time to talk with the listeners here, all three of them. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I really appreciate you.
Well, Eric, I hold you in high regard, and I appreciate you allowing me to be part of this, and continued success to you. And man, let's stay on doing this. Let's do this regularly.
That sounds like a plan to me.
All right, brother.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Tempered Leadership. Stay safe on your journey out there, and we'll be back next week with another intriguing guest. Take care.